It was a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the world still feels half asleep, and I was sitting at my desk grading papers with a half-empty cup of coffee beside me when suddenly the loud, angry roar of a chainsaw shattered the peace, and at first, I thought maybe a neighbor was trimming trees too early. But when I looked out my window, my stomach dropped because three strange men were standing at our wooden gate, the gate my grandfather Henry had built with his own hands 40 years ago, and one of them was driving a chainsaw right into the beams, while the others watched with smirks on their faces. And I could see from their polo shirts the words HOA Patrol, printed in bold letters. But something about them felt wrong, because they had no badges, no real uniforms, just a clipboard, a chainsaw, and a GoPro strapped to the youngest one's chest like they were filming a show. And panic rushed through me as I ran outside, yelling at them to stop, asking who they were, demanding to see paperwork. But the man with the clipboard only smirked and said, "We don't need licenses for community enforcement." And those words made my blood run cold, because real law enforcement never talks like that. And before I could get close enough to block them, the main beam gave way with a terrible crack. The gate splintered apart, and 40 years of family history crashed to the ground as wood chips flew across the yard, and my heart ached like I had just watched someone tear down part of my grandfather's soul. But before I could act, my grandfather Henry, a 72-year-old Vietnam veteran, stepped slowly onto the porch with his coffee in hand, his face calm like a man who had already seen worse than this, and he set the cup down, walked with steady steps to the shed. And when he came back, he was carrying the relic that changed everything, the belt-fed M60 machine gun he had kept since the war. The same weapon he had never fired since coming home, and in one smooth motion he placed it on the porch table, set up the tripod, loaded the belt, and then sat down like he was just another old man, enjoying his drink. And in his steady voice he said, "Just having coffee on my own land, and that was enough to freeze the fake patrol where they stood." The chainsaw went silent, and suddenly the balance of power shifted completely. Because they had come here expecting fear, but instead they were face to face with a man who had spent years in combat and wasn't shaken by their fake authority, and neighbors began to appear. Phones out, recording everything, while the youngest with the GoPro kept filming. But now his hands were shaking, and the silence of the street was so heavy it felt like even the air itself was waiting for what would happen next, until finally the man with the clipboard muttered, "We'll be back with real authorities," and Henry didn't even blink. He just took another sip of his coffee and said, "Looking forward to meeting them," which sent shivers through everyone watching, and the fake patrol quickly backed away and drove off. But I knew deep down this was not the end. It was only the beginning. By that afternoon, the videos had spread everywhere. Neighbors posted clips, the GoPro footage leaked. And by evening, the standoff was viral. Half the country calling Henry a hero for standing his ground, half calling him reckless and dangerous. But Henry himself didn't care. He sat quietly on the porch, telling me, "The truth will come out. Patience wins wars." But I wasn't patient. I couldn't be. So I started digging into records, looking for any notice, violation, or legal order that would justify what they had done. But there was nothing. No official papers, no fines, no reason. Until after hours of searching, I found documents connecting the so-called HOA patrol to a company called Pinnacle Development, a powerful developer that had been trying to build a road straight through our property, and suddenly it all made sense. They weren't protecting the neighborhood. They were trying to scare us out of the way, using intimidation to push families off their land. And when I showed Henry, he studied the maps like a soldier reviewing a battlefield, his finger tracing the red line that cut through our property. And he said firmly, "These aren't neighbors. They're thieves." And I could see in his eyes that the fight had become clear. We rebuilt the gate with stronger beams, and then we called a meeting with neighbors in our living room. And they came with their own stories of harassment, threatening letters. Fake patrol visits, intimidation tactics, and together, we realized it was all part of the same scheme. And that's when Sarah Collins, a sharp attorney who had been watching the videos online, offered to help us. And she told us this was more than intimidation. It was organized fraud, maybe even a RICO case, and we finally felt like we had a path forward. But before the law could catch up, they came back. This time, it wasn't just three men. It was Karen, the HOA president herself, walking down our driveway in a black suit with a leather briefcase in her hand and her fake patrol marching behind her. And she carried herself with arrogance like she owned the land, demanding that Henry surrender his illegal weapon immediately, calling him a danger to the community. But Henry remained calm, pulling out legal documents proving his ownership and rights. While I streamed everything live, and Karen's face began to crack as thousands watched online. And then fate handed us the final proof, because one of her men dropped a folder, and when it hit the ground, papers spilled everywhere. And clear on the top page was the logo of Pinnacle Development, shining under the sunlight. And I quickly zoomed in with my phone camera so the world could see the connection. And suddenly Karen lost her mask of confidence, stammering and scrambling, while neighbors shouted, "Fraud! Exposed!" And when the sheriff arrived, summoned by calls from all over, he reviewed the evidence, looked at Henry's papers, and confirmed Henry had broken no laws, but Karen had, and though she tried to argue, her voice shook and she finally retreated, glaring at us with hate and whispering to me as she passed, "We'll be back with real authorities." And that night, I couldn't sleep because I believed her, and my fears were right. At exactly 2:00 a.m., our motion sensors lit up the cameras, and on my phone screen, I saw three masked men creeping toward our rebuilt gate with bolt cutters. Their shadows stretching long under the moonlight, and adrenaline surged through me as I shouted into the livestream, "You're on camera," and hit the floodlights, turning night into day, and the men froze like deer caught in headlights, their eyes wide as the red live sign glowed on my phone, watched by tens of thousands, and then our trap triggered. The gate collapsing loudly with a crash that echoed through the neighborhood, harmless but terrifying, and they stumbled back in panic faces, caught in perfect detail on camera license plates recorded for evidence. And just when it seemed they might run, Henry stepped calmly onto the porch, holding the American flag in one hand, the M60 resting behind him in plain view. Not pointed at anyone but there, as a symbol, and in a voice as steady as stone, he said, "Gentlemen, you are committing felonies on private land." And the words carried more weight than any weapon. And while two of the masked men cursed and tried to flee, the youngest, Chase, dropped his GoPro, his hands trembling, and admitted, "I didn't know what I was part of." And Henry looked at him with eyes that had seen both war and peace, and said softly, "Son, you're learning choose better employers." And that one sentence struck like lightning, spreading across the internet within hours, becoming the phrase that defined the fight. And the next day, headlines exploded. HOA president exposed. Pinnacle Development tied to fraud, Karen arrested. Executives face RICO charges, and the scam collapsed overnight, the fake patrol. Members charged, Karen taken away in handcuffs, and Pinnacle's empire crumbling under lawsuits. And when the storm passed, the community came together, neighbors, rebuilding the gates stronger than ever, children painting the words, "Private land protected, Constitution defended" across the fresh beams. And the street felt alive with unity instead of fear. And through it all, Henry remained the same, calm and steady, sitting on the porch with his coffee, the flag waving proudly above him, the M60 resting nearby, not as a threat, but as a reminder that courage, not fear, had saved us. And as the sun set over the rebuilt gate, I filmed one final message for the world, telling viewers that thieves can wear uniforms and call themselves leaders, but freedom does not belong to them. It belongs to ordinary people brave enough to defend it. And as the camera pulled back, showing my grandfather sitting quietly in the golden light, the new gate standing tall, and neighbors smiling together, the truth was clear: our land, our rights, and our freedom were safe again. Because we chose not to bow down, but to fight back.